Hello, how are you? I am so excited to talk about some of my favorite books that I've read over the course of this year and go through them all, but I'd also love to know, what are your top books? What has given you great pleasure, and what have you just loved reading? Let me know in the comments below. I want to hear about them. So it goes without saying that this has been quite a year, and it might seem that more time at home might be the ideal conditions for readers. The general stress and anxiety caused by the pandemic and all the tumultuous politics has certainly challenged my concentration at different times. And I know for many readers it's created severe practical problems as well. But books have also been the most wonderful respite, providing me escapism and intellectual engagement on different issues. And while I mainly read new fiction, I've also loved getting into Anthony Trollope's Barsetshire series. This is a whole series of books from the 19th century, so it just takes me back to another era, and I just loved getting into them. So I'm looking forward to reading more of these in the new year. And maybe it's not a coincidence that some of my favorite books this year have been 500 plus page epics that have allowed me to fully immerse myself in these different fictional worlds. So I started reading The Eighth Life by Nino Haratischvili in 2019, and I didn't actually finish it until May of this year. But it is the most dazzling family epic that covers many different generations and wars. And it was also one of my highlights of this year, being able to interview the author and her translators for a video which is up on my channel, and I'll put a link to it below in case you want to check it out and find out more about this really great book. Joyce Carol Oates writes so insightfully about the human condition and social issues in contemporary America. Her books can also often feel eerily prescient, but her most recent novel, Night, Sleep, Death, the Stars, surely must be one of her most monumental achievements in its piercing depiction of the process of grief, but also the very timely way that this story opens with a racially motivated incident where police use excessive force, and the dynamic way that she shows the McLaren clan's reaction to this really speaks to the way that prejudice is formed and the way that others can grow to fear people who are different from themselves. But it's also just the most beautiful story of a family. And it's been one of the great privileges of my life being able to interview Joyce about this novel and her more recent collection of novellas called Cardiff by the Sea. So I'll put links to those interviews below as well if you haven't watched them already and if you want to check them out. The Mirror in the Light was one of the publishing events of the year, and Hilary Mantel's new novel was not only one of the longest books that I read this year, but combined with the first two books in the Thomas Cromwell trilogy, which I also read before this novel's publication, it adds up to over 2,000 pages. So I might have had some difficulty wrapping my head around some of the Tudor politics that's portrayed in these novels, but it was also one of the most wondrous reading experiences I've ever had. I think Hilary Mantel deserves all of the awards and the acclaim she's got because her writing is utterly gripping and psychologically insightful, and she also has a way of making history feel very, very relevant. I had an odd hankering to read sci-fi this year, and another new doorstopper that I was completely enthralled by is Rian Hughes' astonishingly inventive debut novel, XX. So the story is about a strange signal that's picked up from outer space and a mysterious craft that crashes into the moon, and this allows an unlikely hero and his tech company to uncover a secret alien plot. And the question is whether these aliens are here to save humanity or to destroy it. And I know that sounds like quite a generic sci-fi story, but there is so much more to this novel novel than weird aliens. There's much in it about technology and physics and consciousness and the progress of human culture itself. It's also so playful in its use of graphics and font that really adds to the story. So it's a very playful novel, as well as an edifying read that completely gripped me for all of its 977 pages. Alternatively, a very slender novel, which also absolutely gripped me and left a lasting impression, is Minor Detail by Adania Shibli, which is translated by Elizabeth Jacquet. In this novel, a woman comes across an article which briefly mentions the rape and murder of a Palestinian woman in the Negev desert in the War of 1948. From there, she goes on this process of discovery, trying to find out more about her life. The novel is in two parts, and it's about our connection with the past and people who have been marginalized and those who have been forgotten. And it's so artfully done how the two sections of this book mirror each other to form a bridge with history. Being a book prize fanboy, I'm always curious to follow and read what's listed for the Booker Prize, and this year two titles really stood out for me. The first is Burnt Sugar by Avni Doshi, which describes one of the most tense mother-daughter relationships I've ever read about. The narrator Antara's mother is showing signs of dementia, and she finds herself in the uncomfortable position of becoming a carer for the mother who never really cared or nurtured her in the way that she needed to be when she was a girl. And this is brilliantly dramatized, but it's also so insightful and moving the way this novel describes memory and questions how much we're honest with ourselves. The winner of this year's Booker Prize was, of course, Sugibane by Douglas Stewart, the heartbreaking story of a sensitive boy and his troubled mother in Glasgow in the 1980s. It is the most penetrating and moving account of alcoholism that I've ever read. But for all its tragedy, there are also beautiful and wonderful moments of humanity and humor in this novel. I remember one scene in particular when a group of women get new bras and they're all trying them on, and it's utterly hilarious. But I also love the way this debut novel portrays Shuggie's precociousness and the way it sort of deconstructs masculinity. While some curmudgeonly authors have been whining about the death of the serious novel this year, there have been many extraordinary debuts proving that there are strong and powerful voices emerging in fiction, and I had the honor of being a judge in the first book category of the Costa Book Awards this year, and one novel that was listed is Love After Love by Ingrid Persaud. This is the story of a single mother in modern-day Trinidad, her son, and their friend Mr. Chaitan, and together they form a family unit, but when certain secrets emerge, it threatens to unravel their relationships with each other. This book made me laugh and cry like no other book that I've read this year. It is so filled with light and heartbreak and humor that I just absolutely loved it. Like with the end of Hilary Mantel's trilogy, another tremendous literary multi-novel saga that came to an end this year is Ali Smith's Seasonal Quartet. But rather than mining history, Smith records and reflects upon our current times in these books, and it comes to a conclusion in summer, and it is the most glorious ending, both in how it brings together many characters from the previous novels, but also the way it ponders on what is happening right now with the pandemic and our politically divided times. Her characters are nuanced and complex, and her writing is filled with so much humor and heart that it is just such a pleasure to read. Another deeply pleasurable novel I read this year is the great Edmund White's most recent novel, A Saint from Texas. This story chronicles the lives of twin sisters who are born and raised in rural Texas in the 1950s, and although they are identical, they go on to live very different lives, where one sister follows pious charity work in Colombia, and the other sister, who's very socially ambitious, climbs the echelons of Parisian society. This novel completely charmed and bewitched and mesmerized me. It is great fun to read, but it is also so insightful about family life and the formation of identity. Finally, a novel I read just recently and found incredibly moving is The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donahue. It's so interesting how the circumstances of our lives can really change and alter how we respond to what we're reading. So unsurprisingly, this story about a nurse who works in the maternity ward of a Dublin hospital in 1918 during the outbreak of the Great Flu really hit home for me. And Emma Donahue wrote this before the pandemic this year, so it's extraordinary how many details she gets right about the way that people and society respond to such an outbreak. I feel like I've experienced a lot of the patterns of behavior that are described in this novel now. But beyond its relevancy, this is a tremendous story about strength in the face of great adversity, and it is also a very tender love story. Those are my favorite books that I've read this year. It'd be great to know if you have any thoughts or feelings about them, if you've read them yourself, or if you're curious to read them. Let me know in the comments below, but I'd also love to know what are your favorite books of this year. What books have consoled and inspired you? Let's have a chat in the comments below. I hope you're doing well and staying safe and reading good things. I'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.